And now it's time for Plank of the Day.
Hello, it's Plank of the Day time.
Now, I wouldn't ordinarily pick Boris Johnson to be Plank of the Day because overall, despite the fact that he managed to screw completely most of the country with his lockdown and most of the country with his anti-Brexit manoeuvres, because of course he was the one who promised us that 19,000 people would be the absolute limit of the numbers coming in during his prime ministership to this country illegally. And of course, it turned out to be an awful lot more than that. And in fact, the Reform Party call it the Boris wave that was created by him winning the election in 2019 and then completely letting everybody down when it came to Brexit, completely letting everybody down when it came to the business of locking us down and the business of wearing masks and being frightened of COVID and all the rest of it. But the reason that I'm making him Plank of the Day is because of something that happened over the weekend. He appeared on Laura Kuenssberg's show, which goes out on a Sunday morning, of course, on the BBC, BBC One to be precise. And he turned up to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And it was obviously a pre-recorded interview, so he can't even claim that he was in a hurry and he didn't have a chance to fix his hair. But just have a look at this.
If we're going to have a plan for boots on the ground, I may be going in advance of a lot of thinking in the UK at the moment. But if we're going to have a plan for boots on the ground after the war, after Putin has condescended to have a ceasefire, then why not do it now? Just to make this point that it is up to the Ukrainians. I mean, these people wouldn't be there in a war-fighting capacity, right?
To be clear, you're saying that right now that UK military forces and from other European countries should go to Ukraine, to safe parts of Ukraine, to make a statement, to flip that switch, as you've said, in Vladimir Putin's head, showing intent.
Yes, I think we're willing to do it in the context of a ceasefire, which of course puts all the initiative, all the power in Putin's hands. Why not do it now? There's no logical reason that I can see why we shouldn't send some peaceful ground forces there to show our support, our constitutional support for a free, independent Ukraine. That this is a political thing. It's about whether Ukraine is a free country or not. If it's a vassal state of Russia, which is what Putin wants, then obviously it's up to Putin to decide who comes to his country. If it's not, then it's up to the Ukrainians.
I mean, it's not just that he looks like a sort of a bad version of Paul Weller after a night out on the tiles, but not just his hair either. Did you see that sort of underneath his chin, the line of his chin, there was a kind of a growth of what looked like about a week's worth of stubble, which wasn't really stubble. It was actually, like half a sideburn or something, or a beard. And you just think, you know exactly what you look like, mate. You know exactly what you're trying to do here. You're trying to make yourself look more eccentric than you actually are. Because I think, in truth, Boris Johnson is not anywhere near as eccentric as he makes out to be, right? I mean, I used to work quite closely with the woman who was one of his assistants at the mayor's office when he was mayor of London, right? And she told me that this is a completely and utterly contrived look by Boris Johnson. Nothing to do with the fact that he's not prepared for interviews, not anything to do with the fact that he's not prepared to go on camera, and everything to do with the fact that he ruffles his own hair, he deliberately doesn't comb it, he deliberately makes it look too long, he deliberately makes it look unkempt, because he thinks that that is in some way funny, or in some way, I don't know, indicative of his kind of madcap ways. But in truth, he's probably much less madcap than he makes out to be. I mean, how many times have you known people who pretend to be eccentric, actually not being eccentric at all? And the other reason I want to call him a plank is not just his appearance, it's some of the things that he came out with, which included this. Why not do it now, he said. There is no logical reason that I can see why we shouldn't send some peaceful ground forces to Ukraine to show our support. Well, I don't know anyone sensible in this country who thinks we should be sending any ground forces to Ukraine, apart from the fact that we don't really have very many ground forces to begin with. We certainly don't need to send kids out there to a war zone so they can get shot up and butchered by the Russians, right? Or indeed by the Ukrainian friendly fire. We are not in a position to go and send peacekeepers to Ukraine. We're not in a position in any way to send sort of the world's policemen to various different countries in Europe to make sure that the peace continues. Because that's not our job. We are a very much smaller and much less involved power than we used to be. Keir Starmer's seen to that. Keir Starmer, of course, in the one place that I would agree with Boris Johnson on, has made yet another massive blunder by refusing to allow air bases in the UK to be used by the United States of America when they want to bomb Iran. You know, according to Starmer and his merry band of thieves in Downing Street, it might be in breach of international law. Well, actually, no. It's nothing to do with international law. It's everything to do with the fact that because certain members of their party are reliant upon certain members of society in order to make sure that they continue to keep their seats, they don't want to upset them. And therefore, they are siding effectively with Iran. You know, the mad mullahs, the people who bankroll Hamas, the people who bankroll Hezbollah, the people who bankroll the Houthis, the people who bankroll, in some ways, ISIS. Oh yeah, it's all right if we support them because it means that the Muslim community in Britain will support us. Well, that's disgusting, isn't it? And ridiculous. So we'll talk about Starmer again another time. But for right now, Boris Johnson is plank of the day.
Hello, it's plank of the day time.
To be honest, he might actually be more than that. He might actually be plank of the decade. Have a look at this.
I have read that there are some people, probably the type, who think of defecting to UK, who present themselves at A&E with barely credible injuries sustained in the course of what I can only call vacuum cleaner abuse. The machines belong from. Subconscious rebelled. The baggage handlers in his memory went on strike, as indeed they would. Everybody who studies British politics knows my realistic chances of becoming Prime Minister are only slightly better than my chances of being decapitated by a frisbee, blinded by a champagne cork, locked in a disused fridge, or reincarnated as an olive. So that's what the EU would be. It would be a gigantic lobster with a butter sauce or something like that.
Boris Johnson is plank of the day.
Hello, it's plank of the day time.